Hi, today I thought I'd do another little blog video. So this isn't so much about specific playing techniques or anything, but it's just a little chat about phrasing. Phrasing keeps me up at night. It's the thing I think about most of all. And why? Because, well, phrasing is the thing that defines you as an improvising musician. Phrasing is the most important thing. When you think about all the great standout players, you think about Van Halen, Mark Knopfler, Matheny, Wayne Krantz, Jeff Beck, Alan Murphy, Robert Fripp. They're just a bunch of my favourite players. You kind of instantly know who they are by hearing examples of their playing. You immediately connect that sound to that person, and that's because of their phrasing. It all comes down to that. It's the thing that makes them unique. So I think before you talk about phrasing, you need to talk a little bit about improvising. So in a conceptual sense, you've got to get your head around what is improvising and what are you actually trying to achieve by that. So I'm going to put up a little picture here. I'm going to call this image 1. And what you see here in this picture is you on the left and an audience on the right and a guitar in the middle. Now the idea with improvising is that you express yourself, you come up with some ideas, you transfer those ideas onto the guitar when you plug it into an amp, and then that goes firing out and the audience hears it and reacts to it or not, as the case may be. And that's basically the process. So the thing in the middle is the guitar, and the guitar really effectively is just a tool. It's a tool you use to express yourself, okay, and communicate with an audience. So what I want to do is, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I want to simplify even more. Let's look at a second picture. Now in this picture, all I've done is I've taken out the guitar. So basically what you have here is a direct relationship between you and the audience. And I think it's important that you should think about that, because ultimately, what are you trying to say? In any musical form, what is it that you want to put across to this audience? Maybe you don't have anything you want to put across to an audience. Maybe there's something very specific you want to put across to an audience. The Sex Pistols had something very specific to say. David Bowie, I think, had something very specific to say. Jimi Hendrix had something very specific to say. Eddie Van Halen, Joe Pass, all these people have something specific that they want to communicate to that audience. And it can be different for many players than those two examples there. Eddie Van Halen, what Eddie Van Halen is going to play on a gig is going to be a completely different dynamic to what Joe Pass is going to do at Ronnie Scott's or something like that. It's a completely different way of communicating. And I think it's very important for you to think about that. And that's a question that I can't answer for you. You've got to come up with your own solutions to that. I mean, what my thing is I want to surprise people. I want to turn people's heads. I want to taking a quote from the greatest movie ever made, Gladiator, I want to show them something that they've never seen before, because that kind of works. In art in general, I think that kind of works. I think one of the reasons, for example, Game of Thrones has been such an enormous success is that, well, you never know what's going to come next. You simply cannot predict the next move. And I think audiences find that appealing, and the audiences find that exciting when they simply don't know what's going to come next. The audiences find that compelling. And I think that's true for any art form. It's not just true for cinema or storytelling, it's also true for music. People like to be surprised. They want you to tell them a story, and they don't want to know how that story ends until they get to the end. So that's my thing. I when I'm playing, I like to surprise my audience. I want to give them something that they've never seen before. Well, that's what I try to do. I don't often succeed in that because it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me because I've spent so long listening to the guys that I like listening to, and I'm obviously influenced by that, and it's very hard to pull away from that to form something that's uniquely you. It's a very difficult thing to do. I try and do that. Whether or not I succeed is for others to judge. Okay. All of the great improvisers are searching for something new. If you take the jazz world, for example, Charlie Parker, when he invented bebop, so to speak, he did that because it was something new. It was something different from what all the other guys were doing. Pat Metheny very much is an innovator, constantly searching for new approaches and new sounds and new ways of playing. And for me, that's true of every great jazz musician. Every great jazz musician was in some way innovating, coming up with something new. For me, and this is a very controversial view, and I've had many arguments with jazz musicians about this, but if you take the innovation out of jazz, then it ain't jazz anymore. To me, it's not jazz anymore. For me, playing Girl from Ipanema in a bar, not jazz. It's just playing songs from the American Songbook. Not jazz though, it's just improvising. When I go and see bands down at Ronnie Scott's or any concerts or place like that, the big ticket shows that I spend money to go and see, it's always people like Metheny and like I was at Ronnie Scott's a couple of weeks ago. Drummer from Toto, what's his name? English guy. Simon Phillips. Went to see Simon Phillips at Ronnie's. You know, it's really innovative music. He's doing something really new. What he's not doing is sitting there playing the Days of Wine and Roses. He's not doing that. He's pushing the boundaries of what jazz is and what progressive rock is and progressive music is. And that's why I pay good money to go and see it. I'm not going to pay money to go and see people playing Days and Wine and Roses down the pub. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so the people that are innovating are the people that people pay big money to go and see, and I think that's an important point. Okay, moving on. Let's get to the kind of nub of it. Phrasing. Let's create a context. Let's say, for example, you've been asked to go on a session, and the producer has said to you, right, here's an 8-bar sequence. It's in A minor. Lay something on me. Play a solo. Okay, great. What are the parameters? What are the things what are the tools that are available to you to create great phrasing, for example? Well, first of all, sound, I'd say. Sound is almost the most important thing. It's the sonic you put across. That's the thing that ultimately people pay most attention to, I think. So, you know, with a guitar, you've got all sorts of things. You've got clean guitar sounds, and then you've got full-on filthy guitar sounds, and then you've got everything in between, all the bluesy stuff, the soul stuff, the funk stuff, which uses various degrees of distortion and gain on the sound. So that's really important. It's a very important decision to make. What kind of guitar are you using? Is it a mellow sounding guitar, or are you going to use something more aggressive? So, I mean, that's the first context, is what sound you're going to use. Secondly, the most, I think, important thing is note choices. In this context, it's A minor. So A minor, I mean, the obvious thing you could do is A minor pentatonic. So you can do all that stuff, but that's quite limiting in if you just think that way. You can think in terms of chord substitutions. Over A minor, you can play C major 7th. Which will work. C major 7th over A minor is really good, because in C major 7 there isn't an A, so you're kind of avoiding that very dull root note. And so the major 7th of C, which is B, is the 9th, which creates an interesting colour tone. So substitutions are a great way of going. You can also play outside. You can play. You can go crazy. You can sort of. I mean, one of Well, we'll get to that in a minute. You can play the blues scale. So, you know, because you've got that flat five in the blues scale it's a wrong note essentially, but it creates a tension that when you resolve it sounds really powerful. That thing within music of tension and release is really important. So that's another thing you can do. Again, that whole tension and release thing is really important. And you can go down a whole, you can make 10 videos about how things you can do over A minor. One of the favourite things I like to do, this is what I call my Night in Tunisia riff. I go up a half step and play B flat 7th, and then always resolving it back to A minor. So if you got that kind of sounds a bit weird, but it can sound, if you do it right, it can sound really exciting. Another thing you can do is play E flat 7th over A minor. But as long as you take it back to E minor, it can sound really exciting. What the deal there is, you're playing a bunch of wrong notes. Obviously E flat 7 doesn't work over A minor because it's just, well, E flat is a tritone. It's that blue note, if you like. And so you're playing a bunch of notes that really shouldn't work over A minor, but that's the whole point. So you play that and it creates this effect of going, whoa, that's wrong. But then you end your phrases back into A minor, and then it's like, oh, so it's tension and release. You got that whole tension. You can make a whole video on that. So I won't go any further than that. So note choices. Note choice is really, really important. Yeah, probably, other than sound, is probably the most important thing. Note density. How many notes are you going to play? If you're Yngwie Malmsteen, you're going to squeeze as many notes in there as you possibly can. However, that's not the only way to approach it. The guy from Coldplay, I can't remember his name, plays very simple solos, hardly anything, lots of repetition. Sounds great. In some ways, a lot more effective than a lot of solos with a billion notes in them. Really effective way of coming up with great ideas and great solos. Just single notes, sort of like. Or whatever. Yeah, just depending on what the backing track's doing, it can sound really, really effective. So note density, you've got choices there that you can make. Rhythm's really important. Again, I can make a whole video just on rhythm. And if, for example, if you're playing a bunch of notes and you're going, that's kind of boring because it's all just straight shuffled eighth notes, and you should try and break up the rhythm as much as possible. It creates a much more, that's slightly over the top, but that's it creates a much more interesting sound. Break up the rhythm, leave spaces. One of the masters of this is Wayne Krantz. Wayne Krantz to me is a complete genius. I listen to him, I have absolutely no idea what he's doing, but that's why I find it endlessly fascinating. His approach to music is very rhythmic. It's all about groove and rhythm to me. Check out Wayne Krantz, genius, absolute genius. Yeah, big fan. Okay, so moving on. Lyrical playing, which is probably my thing, is I quite like to play lines like a singer would sing. So imagine you could play things that you could easily fit lyrics to, like. Now in that kind of approach, you don't want to be doing massive intervals because you know you need to keep it all about, because that's what a singer would do. A singer isn't going to play phrases with lots of massive intervals or billions of notes, which they're just not going to take that approach. But I really like that approach to playing because I think I think it's very intuitive, and I think audiences respond to it, and I really like that. So that's another approach. Another approach is effects. You can use effects to great effect. For example, I mean, the obvious example is there's the Edge, and the Edge has taken delays and choruses and all that stuff and what he does, and he's created something very unique. So you can use effects to do something to make your solos really stand out and sound different. Try and avoid using the common ones or the ones that everybody uses. Delays tend to be overused a little bit, I think. I like using delays, but I like using really long delays that you can play off in a rhythmic way. That's almost like a quarter note long, and so you play something and it almost comes back at you as almost a response, and then you can kind of play off that. You can actually always play a harmony off it as well. But you'd think of inventive ways of using effects. Okay, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. There's probably more things, but the most important thing throughout all of this is to be original. It's to come up with your way of doing stuff, and your way of doing stuff should be not the way other people do stuff. Like you can go on YouTube and see lots of videos of fantastic players out there and copy their riffs and their ideas, but at the end of the day, that's their riffs and ideas, and you've got to take the principles behind what they're doing and use them to create your own riffs and your own sound and your own thing, whatever that might be. An example of that is, let's come back to effects. There's some fantastic boxes out there now. I've got little ME80, which is cheap as chips, it's about 200 and something quid, and it's got one of everything in it. And you can create some really wacky stuff with it, but I hardly ever see people doing that, creating really unusual effects that are kind of outside the box a little bit. But that's exactly what you should do. Try and find effects that people don't use much. Try and maybe go to the extreme settings and find stuff that's kind of interesting but musical. Okay. There are some fantastic, like the Boss. I really like the Boss SY300, which is like a guitar synth that doesn't require a pickup, that can completely transform your guitar sound into something totally different, and it responds perfectly well on the guitar. And I don't really understand why people aren't using that more, but they're not, and I don't really understand it. There does seem to be in guitar world over the last few years this thing about tone. Or people are stripping back all the effects and they're getting a decent valve amp and a classic guitar and plug it in and just going for this classic guitar tone thing. Now for me, I'm quite confused about that, because what everybody ends up doing is kind of sounding the same. So that's a unit, and people sounding a little bit the same at the moment, which baffles me, to be honest. I think you should be trying to aim to do the exact opposite to that. You should be trying to find a sound that is unique to you, that, you know, show people something they've never seen before. On that note, there is this kind of phenomenon that I've noticed throughout the music industry and the way people and musicians perceive music. If you remember Alanis Morissette, and she had that sort of crazy off-the-wall way of singing. Well, before Alanis Morissette came along, nobody sang like Alanis Morissette. It almost took Alanis Morissette to come on and sing like that for everybody else to say, oh, you can sing like that. Then it just seems like there was this before Alanis Morissette and after Alanis Morissette thing, because after Alanis Morissette everybody sounded like Alanis Morissette, but it almost took Alanis Morissette to sing like that for it to validate that way of singing, so everybody would sort of go, oh, it's all right, I can do that now. When that's a really strange thing. And so there are two types of leaders. There are leaders and followers. So it depends what you want to be. Do you want to be a leader or do you want to be a follower? I would recommend you be a leader because I think you'll make more progress that way. Find wacky, strange ways of playing things. Like, take for example, Robert Fripp. Robert Fripp is a revolutionary guitar player. I mean, you look at those solos he did on, is it Let's Dance, the Bowie stuff? I might have that wrong, but check that out. It's his playing for Bowie. It's just extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. It's out all the wrong notes. It's, you know, in theory it shouldn't work at all, but it does work, and it's absolutely brilliant. But it takes someone to step out there and make the change, and then other people follow. But people seem very reluctant to take a lead on this. But you should always, throughout whatever types of phrasing you're going to use, in terms of sound, note choices, rhythmic stuff, whatever your approach, in each of those cases, if that's what the crowd's doing, you should try and do something else. And in each one of those instances, you decide to do something else, and then you put all those together, you'll come up with something really unique to you. And I think that will take you. And music is art at the end of the day, and it should be art. You should be expressing something unique, and I think that's kind of really, really important. Yeah, really important. So yeah, well, I think that's just my thoughts on it. Hope it's not too controversial, but you know, be original, be an artist, think differently, phrase differently, come up with something that's unique to you. Okay, if you've got any thoughts on that, I'd be very interested in it, because I think about this stuff all the time. I lay in bed at night thinking about all this stuff. So yeah, get back to me with some comments if you've got any ideas on this subject. I think it's the most important thing, without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, signing off. See you next time. Bye.